Hello, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you guys are in the world. Welcome to our COVID-19 Trends in Digital Marketing webinar that is hosted by Advantix Digital. My name is Amin Benchahar. I'm the Chief Digital Officer at Advantix Digital, and I'll be your moderator today. First off, I hope that everyone who is either speaking or attending today is safe and that their loved ones are safe as well. I know these are really crazy times, and that's the reason why we're all here today, to discuss what's the impact of COVID-19 in an industry that we all love, which is marketing, and how it's impacting our lives. So with that, I wanted to introduce the speakers who are going to be joining us today. We have Jessica Dawson, who is the VP of Performance Marketing at Advantix Digital. We have Courtney Cox, who's the Director of Digital and Experience and Lead Generation at Children's Health. Natalie Hurley, the Director of Marketing at Richard Sandoval. Jerry Huang, the SVP of Product and Development and Innovation at Rosetta Stone. Randy Charles, Head of Marketing at Facet Wealth. And last but not least, Douglas Wong, VP of Marketing at Pi5. With that, we'll start with our first speaker, Jessica Dawson. Jessica and I work together at Advantix Digital. She has an amazing experience in the space. She's worked for very big agencies and has run campaigns for Southwest Airlines, J.Crew, Intuit QuickBooks, and TurboTax. So she's got a lot of experience across different industries. And she'll be telling us a little bit about what she's seeing across all verticals. And then we're gonna start moving by vertical, where each one of the speakers will talk specifically a bit about their own vertical. Jessica, the floor is yours, and thanks a lot for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Amin. I appreciate the intro. Welcome everyone to our first webinar. It's really exciting that you're all here and for us to have you. Today, to Amin's point, I'm going to be talking about the digital journey to recovery. As you guys know, the word journey in digital marketing really represents a customer path and engagement between brands and customers, and understanding a journey that one goes on to identify products and brands that will be used by customers from different areas of their life. And so with that, the customer journey has really seen a shift because of COVID-19. I'm sure a lot of you have seen a similar graphic to this previously, where it shows the customer journey throughout a day, a month, a week, at different touch points. And that journey really starts out on a typical day, maybe at your home, while you're having coffee in the morning and you're on your phone and you get an ad. And then you go on your journey to work. And on that journey, you listen to a podcast or the radio, or maybe you see a billboard about that company and you get to work and you're curious. So you look on your desktop and you start talking to coworkers about your experience and their experience with that brand. And maybe over lunch, you decide to check out the products in store and go experience it yourself. Then on your way home, you might experience another touch point with that brand from that billboard again, or maybe another podcast or a radio ad. And you get home, talk to your family about the good or service. And then maybe after dinner, you get on to watch Netflix, and on your phone, you make a final purchase. And there's a lot to that journey, right? A lot of people involved, a lot of places, a lot of areas for that brand to make a message and reach you. But what if that journey goes from that outdoor experience and out of world and goes to in-home? As with COVID-19, everyone is working from home for the most part nowadays, and mobility is very limited. So a lot of those typical touch points that you would have had with those people in their journey has now moved indoors, and mainly it's gone digital. And not only has mobility changed, but also people's work has changed. And it's changed by household incomes. It's changed by the ability to actually work from home or to have to go into the workplace, and how people are interacting. For example, if you're within the top household income earners, you're 61% more likely to be able to work from home. But if you're within the bottom 25% of income earners, you only have a 9% likelihood to work from home. And that makes your relationships with other people and your interactions very different. Also, if you're in the healthcare industry, it doesn't really matter what your income is. The majority of you are going to be working from the office or your place of work, but that creates engagement with people who may have COVID-19 and have health risks. And so your relationships with your family and friends might also be impacted because you can interact with them on a personal level less because you're interacting with people in healthcare more. And so all of those things really make an impact on who the customer is and their livelihoods and where they're getting their information and how they're interacting. And not only does COVID-19 have impacts on where people are working and how they're interacting, it also has a major impact on their employment status. And that translates into their ability to spend. And so, within the last 4 weeks, we've seen over 22 million jobs or jobless claims be filed. And we're continuing to see a decrease in that week over week as more people have job stability, as things like the PPP loans that have come out from the government have helped keep jobs around. But still, there's a lot of insecurity that is going on with consumers right now because of COVID-19 and the job loss that's been associated with that. And again, with job loss, it comes up financial insecurity. And on average, the average couple that's about 34 years old has about $4,700 saved in their bank account. If you're looking at single people around that age, they've got about $2,700 in savings. And how long is that going to last them over the foreseeable future if they are also paying their mortgage or their rent, their income, and have all of those expenses as well? So these are things that we have to consider as marketers on the impact of our target audiences and where they are. And that also translates into their ability to spend. At the beginning of COVID-19, we saw a huge decrease in discretionary spending, especially on verticals like travel, because you can't travel at this time, or entertainment, because a lot of entertainment venues have had to close down, and events. But we saw a huge spike in spending for very needed items like hand sanitizer, groceries, work from home types of products. And so really the trends have been very fascinating to watch and interesting to see what's been popping and what hasn't. But for marketers, we need to understand, what is that curve going to look like as we start to reopen? Now that we know the trends from before, where can we start to predict what's going to be important to consumers as we do have gradually reopenings of businesses and government, and people can go outside of the home? And really, to answer those questions, you have to do one major thing, and that's relearn your customers, because they're very different than they were 2 months ago in February before all of this happened. And they're going to continue to change in their needs over the next weeks, months, and foreseeable the rest of the year. And so understanding your customers and their new needs and understanding how you can provide value to their new needs and what that looks like is really going to help you win with your customers, develop lifetime relationships with them, and be able to talk to them with more value. A large part of understanding their new needs is understanding their behaviors as well. In the first couple weeks of COVID-19, there was a lot of categories that changed drastically. For example, searches and purchases of luggage went down 77% within the first couple weeks. And bread making supplies went up 652% within the first couple weeks. So people were trying to find new things to do at home. We saw a spike in working from home technology, for example, webcams. And all of those things really created impacts across many different categories of devices and consumer products. And with that, what we can say is this was very interesting data of things that happened in the past, but where do we predict things will go in the future? So really trying to understand what your consumers will need as we reopen is going to put you ahead of your customers and, again, provide that value. Especially in a time where consumers are likely to switch brands. People have been loyal to brands for years and years and years, but what happens when those brands are no longer available because they're only able to be gotten when you're in store? As things are going online, people are open to experiencing brands in new ways. People are using delivery services like Uber Eats or Grubhub at a much larger rate, and new people have come into that space, as well as box delivery services like a Blue Apron or a HelloFresh. And so with those changes in user behavior and the ability to get products that they need, they're open to developing new relationships with brands. And that creates a huge opportunity for brands to, again, provide value, be there when customers need this in this new time, and then develop those relationships over time to have lasting relationships with those customers over the next few weeks, months, and the foreseeable future. About half of people who have switched brands during this time are expected to continue using those brands if the relationships have been positive outside of the COVID-19 trends. So again, it's very important to be there when consumers need you during this time because they are open to those new opportunities. And speaking of, consumers are very optimistic. We are seeing that among millennials, Gen Z, and higher income earners, that people are optimistic on the reopening of businesses and the government and where we are going with COVID-19. And that really is a positive trend because it translates into consumer confidence and spending. Now that we are seeing the job layoffs and unemployment rate start to slow, people are a little bit more sure-footed of their financial future. And because of that, they're open to increasing their discretionary spending, and they have a better view of their financial future, especially when it comes to their job availability. And so with that, and the economy starting to slowly increase, we are seeing that consumer confidence is up. And we're not just seeing that in survey data, we're also seeing that in digital marketing data and trends. And so a lot of publishers and people who manage millions and millions of dollars in ad spend are putting out data right now for us marketers to use as proxies. And so by having multiple platforms and vendors share all of this data, we're able to start to see trends at a greater rate. And so not only at Advantix Digital are we seeing consumers start to have higher conversion rates and also spend more. And so we're seeing return on investment grow, but also other publishers that are putting out their data for us to inform ourselves on what's happening in the marketplace are also seeing vertical trends start to pick up in terms of conversions and purchase, which creates, again, that opportunity for advertisers to be there with their brands who can provide that value to consumers. So really all of that comes to meeting customers where they are now with more value. And not only does that provide value, more value for them, right? So brands need to provide value to their customers, but also brands can get more value out of what's happening currently in the marketplace from a marketing perspective. During COVID-19, a lot of advertisers pulled back their spend, especially in the travel verticals and entertainment industry. And most likely your consumers, even if you're not in travel and entertainment, like to travel and be entertained. And so with that, if advertisers are pulling budgets away from your target market, that means that there is less competition for your audiences in market. And in an auction-based system, if there's less competition in market for your audiences, and there's a lot more availability as digital presence from people is starting to increase, and there's more demand for digital from a user perspective, that creates an opportunity for us within the auction to get better rates and reach more people with less money in a less cluttered market. And so we are seeing across the board from both a web and an app perspective, usage increase across multiple mediums, not only in social media, but news consumption, connected TV consumption, traditional TV consumption, all mediums in home where people can and watch entertainment and find things to do. We are seeing drastic increases. And one amazing stat that I've seen is the increase of millennials on TikTok itself. Not only are people using apps and technologies that they've used before, they're also downloading and introducing themselves into new waves. And so we are seeing changes in the marketplace of audiences available on platforms such as TikTok, which tended to be a younger audience, but now because more millennials are using it, it's starting to change in the portfolio of people that are within that platform. So again, not only are we seeing usership increase, but we're also seeing the dynamic of the target audience change across platforms that may or may not have been as used prior for different audiences. And again, from a connected TV perspective, a lot of people are now cutting their traditional cable and moving more to connected streaming services, especially ad related services where we can, from a marketing perspective, run connected TV or OTT type of advertising. And so from a demand perspective, there's a lot more customer demand for those services and viewership hours, and thus more ad inventory for marketers to take advantage of there, with reductions in other advertisers being in that space as well. And not only is viewership increasing, but engagement is increasing too. So from a time spent perspective and a number of pages perspective for people going through websites and content, they're spending more time and they're looking for more things and being more engaged overall, which is exactly what you want from an audience in which your ads are placed in front of, is that engagement and making sure that people are actually seeing and resonating with what you're putting in front of them. And again, with higher engagement, with more ad inventory available because there's more consumers in digital and lower ad spend from advertisers in general, we're seeing a great reduction in CPMs. And this is just one area in which we're seeing it, which is Facebook. But as Facebook is one of the major players in digital marketing, this is a good proxy for other publishers as well. From data that has been put out, we're seeing CPMs drop, between 20, 30, 40%, depending on your engagement and conversion goals, and also the types of media that's in market. But again, this is a time where advertisers can get into play in spaces at a much cheaper rate, reach more people in their target audience, and get in front of a very engaged audience. And it also depends on what consumers are engaging with, but they're engaged in various places, and all of these places represent areas for brands to come in and create a conversation and provide value. So no matter what brand you are, you want to be where the consumers are and provide that message that's relevant. And so there's a lot of places across the digital landscape that you can engage with customers in a very relevant way. It's just understanding the data, understanding your new customer journey and who they are at this point, where they're going in order to engage and find value in those places. So this has been a lot, and there's a lot of moving pieces here. So where do we start? As marketers, looking at the current landscape, it's changing at a very constant basis. So how do we start to build plans that will resonate for the future? And how do we execute on the things that we currently know? The first is to, again, relearn your customers, understanding them now, their current behaviors, where they are, and then trying to help anticipate where they're going to be next week, over the next couple weeks, within the next month, and then outside of COVID-19, what is their new landscape? And taking into account all of the factors that may have impacted their job status and their friends, their family, their current need state. Then also reassessing your value. How do you provide for those customers in their new need state? What kind of messaging will resonate with them? And how can you build relationships that will be able to be sustained outside of the current pandemic? You also need to be there. There's a lot of brands that I've talked to and heard from that have pulled back in spend in paid search, for example. But if people are raising their hand and saying, hey, I have a need and your service or product matches that need, you have to be there, because most likely your competitors have also pulled back. But if they are still there, you still need to be there where your competitors are too, because the worst thing could be right now is if you are not the brand of choice coming out of this, and if someone else has been there during the time, provided that value. And so making sure that you're there and going to be the brand of choice when people are able to shop after this or during this time will again create relationships that are long lasting. And that really speaks to the visibility and engagement piece. Stay engaged with your current customers. Tell them you're there. Make sure that they know how they can engage with you right now. What are your availability for shopping with them, your hours, all of those types of things will again help encourage them to be with you during this time, and also start talking to those prospects as well and nurturing those relationships outside of just the people that you're currently engaged with. And then also you need to stay informed of the available incentives that are out there. Facebook, Google, Yelp have provided a lot of grants to help marketers and brands keep engaged during this time. But there's also things to help your customers provide value as well. So if you know that there are things that are coming out that could help your customers, translate that, pass it on, because all of those things will again create that loyalty and help build that relationship. And additionally, from a strategy perspective, you really need to prioritize your consumer experience and the relationship with those customers. Keep watch of industry trends as they are continuing to change. We have to be adaptable in our strategies. There is something for planning ahead, but you have to be agile because things are changing at such a constant rate. So you have to be open to that change. And as digital marketers, we are usually open to change because things change so quickly on all of the platforms that we use consistently, but just making sure that you are available to change and watching for trends and making sure you're pivoting depending on the trends and the data that you're seeing is important. Also, there's a little bit of risk involved as well, but it's much better to make sure that you're acting now and being ahead of the game. There's a lot of industry articles out there and studies that have shown that in recessions, the brands that do advertise and try to provide this value during this time usually come out ahead of those that don't. And so being there while customers are searching for you, being top of mind for customers in market, or who might have to pause on being in market now, but might come back later, all are very important to, again, being on top of things as things recover and getting out of COVID-19's impact in the current state. Thank you for watching my webinar on the current state. And I think Amin has some questions for me, or if there have been other questions that have been asked during this time, I'm happy to answer a few of those before we move on to the next speaker.
Thank you very much, Jessica. And I forgot to mention to the attendees that they have the ability to submit questions on the Q&A section at the bottom of the screen. But I do have a question for you that I've received. And the question is, what is one important strategy that we can use to engage current customers right now?
So one thing that you could be doing to engage your current customers right now is to ask for reviews. So about 90% of customers in the US will make purchase decisions based on reviews. And about 81% of customers will actually pay more for a product if it has positive reviews. And during this time, as people have a lot of availability online and are digitally present from working from home, they have the time and the energy to write reviews. People love to talk about their experiences and themselves. And so now nurturing your current customers and asking for those types of reviews while they have the time to write them is a perfect way to, one, build your business and then also nurture those relationships and get candid feedback on the value that you're currently providing.
Great, thank you so much, Jessica. Really appreciate all of your insight. And with that, we'll move to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Courtney Cox Wakefield. She is the Director of Digital Strategy at Children's Health. Her mission is to cultivate space in which families can experience empathy and empowerment. She drew that experience as a parent, where she spent nearly 100 days in the NICU with their daughter to work every day. Courtney's team looks after the user experience of children's.com, as well as search engine optimization and paid search. She's a frequent speaker at digital marketing events, serves at the editorial board of the Journal of Digital and Social Media Strategy. And more importantly, she's the co-author of a book that I wrote with her. So Courtney, thank you for being here. And please share with us your thoughts on your experience in the healthcare with COVID and how you guys have been shifting. And again, the floor is yours. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for that intro, Amin, and thanks, Jessica, for the intro that you shared. A lot of those numbers are really important and obviously shifting all the time as people kind of learn what the new normal looks like. So it's interesting to see everything kind of all at one place. I want to skip the obvious impact on healthcare. If you guys have been paying attention at all, you kind of know what that is, and you're not here to hear that piece. But I do want to talk about some things that are a little bit counterintuitive in terms of the way that the healthcare business and healthcare marketing in particular have been impacted. Right now, we're so hyper reliant on the industry for really emergent care related to COVID-19, but also related to other conditions and things like that that are also respiratory conditions and things that are reliant on PPE and the ventilators that are in short supply right now. So we're hyper reliant on our industry, and usually in periods where we're hyper reliant on an industry, that brings growth. But the problem is that as we have had to do so much of this social distancing, we've canceled as an industry millions of appointments that are not urgent or emergent. Our system itself, just as an independent individual system, has canceled tens of thousands of appointments that were not urgent or emergent. And that includes even things like surgeries. So it's a little, again, counterintuitive. My daughter had a surgery where she had to have a small procedure done, but it was going to, if it wasn't done, result in some issues for her down the line, some really serious issues. And so she had to have this small surgery done. That in this case, in today's world, would be considered a non-emergent or non-essential procedure, even though it was going to lead to issues down the line. So that's a little bit counterintuitive. We've had to make a lot of these cancellations. And even in cases where procedures or conditions are emergent, are urgent, do need to be taken care of immediately, people are avoiding coming to hospitals. They're avoiding even going to their doctor. I saw one statistic, I can't remember exactly what the numbers were, but there's all these hospitals in New York that normally see lots of people coming in for heart conditions, heart attacks. They see them coming in for heart attacks. People are, they've seen a dramatic decrease in the number of heart attacks that they see. Why? Is it because people are having less heart attacks? Well, no, of course not. It's because people are choosing to deal with their heart attack at home. And that's obviously a problem for public health, but it's also a problem for hospitals who are reliant on the income from insurance companies and from people paying for that care. So what we're seeing across the board in the healthcare industry, despite our hyper reliance on them in this moment, is pay cuts and furloughs. Talking about children's hospitals in particular, all kinds of news is coming out, right? Texas Children's slashed their executive pay by 20%. Stanford Health has furloughed or cut the pay of 14,000 workers. Akron Children's is cutting their budgets by $40 million. There's just, headline after headline after headline of these major cuts that are happening in the healthcare industry. Really grateful that Children's Health is not on a hiring freeze, or we haven't cut anything at this point, but we are being asked to be extremely conservative with our spending and with our hiring. And that's obviously been a change for us. So in an industry that before all of this was otherwise growing and thriving, and that we're now very reliant on as a community, we're still seeing really hard times, like many of the other industries that you hear from today. And we're a nonprofit system, which is in this moment really helpful, but for-profit systems are struggling even more. They have tons of pressure to increase shareholder value. And right now, they're really struggling to do that. They're really struggling to make those year-on-year growth numbers that they set at the beginning of this year. And as a nonprofit, we're sort of immune from that because our main incentive is to make sure that we're existent for years and years and years, not to grow profits year over year. So that's been a real benefit for us. But if you are working at a for-profit healthcare system, or if you have clients that are for-profit, you really need to think about how that's impacting them, the fact that they have to answer to shareholders. So that's kind of like the financial impact or the baseline that we're dealing with here. It's the water we're all swimming around in. And in the midst of that, consumers are coming to us for information, support, and guidance more than they ever have before. The initial shift that we had to make was we had been focusing really hard on marketing, really trying to grow our system, really trying to grow and improve our consumer experience. And all of a sudden with COVID-19, there's been this major shift in the industry overall, away from marketing, away from consumer experience efforts, and toward communications. And for a lot of us in the digital space, we may have dealt with like internal communications and external communications and public relations on the periphery, but it definitely wasn't what we were doing on the day-to-day. And now most of my time is spent thinking about internal and external communications and public relations and educating the public versus doing marketing. So that was an initial big shift for us. We put a lot of projects on hold so that we could focus on communications. And in addition to that, in addition to the need to do all of this communication, when the demand was really high for that information from our consumers and speed was really necessary, there's also this risk for misinformation. A lot of other industries are dealing with this too, but healthcare has been particularly impacted by it. And so as we were publishing new information, every single thing we published had to be reviewed by a group internally that we call the command center. If you work in healthcare, you'll know what that means. But basically, it's a group of people who meet every single day, and they're together basically all day long, who are helping make decisions and move things forward and approve things. And that really slowed down a process that otherwise could have been really fast. And so I know a lot of our agency partners were trying to help us get through this, this period where so much communication was necessary. And they were experiencing, I think, some frustration about the fact that we had to get everything approved through the command center. And so it was slowing things down. So if you have healthcare clients, definitely try to see what you can do to be patient and to help your clients get through the process of approvals during a time when risk is really high. There's also in healthcare a longer consideration period for most businesses than most businesses have. So you think about like retail or even things like restaurants, food services. People make decisions pretty quickly, right? Yeah, okay, we need to eat dinner. Let's get in the car. Let's go to Tribal All Day Cafe, or let's go to this other place. Okay, you know, I need a new bread maker. Let me go on Amazon and do some research and buy that thing. For those groups to turn off advertising temporarily while they're figuring out, okay, how are things going to go, and then turn it back on, it makes a lot of sense to do that, because during a time when people aren't actively buying in the moment, it makes sense to turn off advertising or to turn spend way down. With industries like healthcare and some others, I know the travel industry is a similar way. People make much longer buying decisions. So if you're going to have a surgery, especially if it's an elective surgery, you're going to spend a lot of time researching. You're going to probably get a second opinion. You're probably going to talk to multiple doctors. And that means that from the time that someone initially kind of does a search about a particular procedure or a condition or a specialist, it may be weeks, months, even up to a year, sometimes greater than a year, before they actually get that procedure done, before they actually have that first appointment or have that surgery. And because of that, when I'm thinking about turning off my marketing, I have to think about, okay, if I needed to respond to the demand today, I needed to turn off my advertising 6 months or a year ago. Well, I can't go back and do that. I already spent that money. And so I have to think about, okay, how do I spend my dollars that I have right now most efficiently today, so that I can save the money I need to save now to make sure that we can survive this moment, and also make sure that I'm still getting the flow of leads and email addresses and all the things that I need to make sure that my marketing 6 months and a year from now pays off when we're reopened, when we've got people coming in the door, when hopefully we are back at work or back to our new normal at least. And so we've really got to be thinking about that as the healthcare industry and the travel industry and some of these other groups that have really long buying cycles. So if you have healthcare clients, especially healthcare clients where it's elective surgeries that are happening and things like that, I'd really encourage you to have that conversation about, okay, if we turn off advertising today, what's the impact of that when we come back to work? Because you don't want to try to solve the problem today and cause long-term issues for their pipeline. We're also seeing things where, okay, that answering that question about how can I be more efficient? We're seeing maybe a shift away from TVC and toward digital channels that can be changed rapidly. So you think about, okay, if I buy a TV ad and I put an advertisement out there and it's ready to go into market, and today something happens where I need to make a shift. You know, we have to close a location, or we're opening maybe COVID testing or something like that, and I've got this advertisement that's totally missing the mark. Well, I can't create a commercial in a day. I can't even really edit B-roll and turn it around in a day, but I can change paid search advertising, right? So you're seeing some systems shift away from those hard to change mediums toward things like digital channels change really rapidly. I think that's really good news for digital folks in our industry. And we're also seeing things where, if you've got a lot of awareness-based advertising in market right now, you're probably shifting away from that, thinking more about demand-based advertising. It makes a lot more sense to spend money on somebody who's searching and saying, I need this surgery, than somebody who is just sitting on their couch and maybe doesn't need that surgery at all and is getting an awareness campaign from you. Definitely that awareness is really helpful for down the line, but when you have to cut, it makes more sense to spend it in demand versus awareness. And so we've been making some shifts that way. And also I've seen the industry as a whole making some of those changes. And then, like all industries, we're thinking a lot about tone, right? A lot of our advertisements that had been in market, and even photos and images that we had on our homepage of children's.com, they were very celebratory images and very celebratory videos. And right now, that just doesn't feel like the moment we're in. We maybe want to celebrate healthcare workers and things like that, but there's a right tone that you can hit with that. And we just weren't being somber enough. It wasn't as respectful as we wanted to be to the moment. And so we have swapped out some advertising on TV, and we're right now on children's.com, we have a provider who's dancing with a patient. They're dancing in the hallway. Beautiful image, tested really well. We love it. It served us well for a long time, but right now it's too celebratory. So we're moving to a different, equally beautiful image, communicates some of the same things, but has a bit of a more somber tone than the one that we've had previously. So thinking about those things too, and then also really trying to keep things going through all of this. We had projects like online scheduling and chatbots that they have positive implications for what we've got going with everybody shifting to being at home and shifting towards digital, and we don't want to stop that. In terms of the really long-term impacts that this is going to have, I think, we're never going to go back to a world where virtual health is not huge. And so we have to think about, okay, now it's possible. Now patients know that they want to do this and that it's possible. We got to figure out as an industry, how do we get reimbursements for that? How do we advertise for it? How do we make it work? And then also, I think, as I mentioned before, we're seeing much more investment in digital, and I don't think that's going to end as well. One thing that is happening across advertising overall too is the acceptance of low fidelity video. Here we are, we're having this, I'm shooting this with my webcam. People are getting more used to this low fidelity, and I don't think that's going to change either. I think it's going to be a big benefit to our customers and to our industry overall. I think I'm out of time, so thank you guys very much, and I'll kick it back over to Amin.
Thank you so much, Courtney. Really appreciate all of your insight. And I do have a question for you. So one of the questions that we have is, how has your team adapted internally with the shift from, being the digital marketers in the room into being, the PR arm of a big institution, which is Children's? How did you guys adapt?
Well, luckily we have a lot of partners internally who are focused on comms, who are very smart and that we have built relationships with over time. So we really leaned on them for messaging. And then we said, okay, great. Now that you've given us that message, let us blow this out into a bunch of recommendations about how we can spread this message far and wide through all of our different channels. And we brought those things back to them and said, hey, this is kind of what we want to do. Of course, that had to route through the command center, as I mentioned before. But because we had already built that strong connection between our two groups, that really helped. So if you have those resources, whether they're agencies or internal, and you haven't built that connection yet, you need to go build that connection, because it's healthcare today that is experiencing that need, but it could be your industry later. So you definitely want to try to build those internal relationships, or those relationships with agencies that maybe are not digital, but in a crisis like this, they're really important connections to have.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Courtney. And Jessica, actually, we have some questions that were submitted for you that I didn't have a chance to ask you. if you don't mind unmuting yourself. That's awesome. So the first question I have for you is, with reviews on hold via Google, what other platforms do you recommend?
So for reviews outside of Google, because right now Google is currently paused with reviews due to COVID-19 and people posting unfortunate reviews like 1 stars for businesses not even being open. There are other ways to generate reviews through Yelp, Facebook, and other industry related aggregators. So for example, there's, from an advertising agency perspective, aggregators like Clutch that we ask clients to review us on, that's related to our industry and helps us find new clients. So those types of things, just go for the Yelps of the world, the Facebooks of the world, but it really depends on your business and your industry. I know another question that was also asked was about the deck. It will be available after this. We're also going to send out the recording of this entire webinar afterwards for your reference. So those resources will be available to you as well.
Yeah, and you have actually another question. And the question is, what is the best-in-class approach for brands' voice tone in their messaging as its relation to the coronavirus? Some companies have really embraced it, while others have avoided it altogether. How do you ensure you're not being tone deaf? When I see luggage ads or travel ads right now, I think, yeah, right. You know, same can go with other verticals like event-based apparel, for example, prom ads.
Mm-hmm. So it really depends on your brand and your voice. I think people who are doing it right, that are in the travel space, for example, are making fun of themselves, right? And so basically poking fun at the fact that you can't really buy their product right now, but knowing that once this opens up, you want to go on that trip, you know, those types of messages do resonate. And they say, hey, you know, when you can go to Cancun in the near future, bring a fashionable piece of luggage with you and you'll be set. You know, those pre-planning things. So just, again, you know, sometimes it is embracing what's happening and bringing that message together. That doesn't work for every brand, and it doesn't work for every brand tone. So, you know, you really have to know what your brand voice is, work with your creative team to make something that's catchy. You know, it doesn't always have to be that Oreo Super Bowl, you know, Twitter moment. It can be something that's, you know, small, but makes a difference to the people that are your target audience as well. So I would just consider all of those things. I would say the one thing that you don't want to do is take advantage of the situation and, you know, be blatant in your messaging, and, you know, make sure that when you are messaging around COVID-19, it's with, you know, white kid gloves, and you're making sure that you are being sensitive to people in their current states, because there's a lot of emotional impact that COVID has had. So the one thing you don't want to do is be insensitive in your messaging and go too far. There's definitely that line. So as long as you're, you know, more positive and keeping within those types of themes, I think you'll definitely, you know, have more success than not.
Great, thank you so much, Jessica. And our next speaker is Natalie Herlich, who's the Director of Marketing at Richard Sandoval. Natalie worked for Hilton Worldwide, Hyatt, and has a lot of experience in both hospitality and restaurant business. Natalie, thank you so much for joining us all the way from Denver. And can't wait to hear about your thoughts into the impact of, again, COVID in your industry. And yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for attending today. Delighted to be a part of this. I won't state the obvious. Obviously, every industry in some way, shape, or form has been impacted by COVID-19. However, being in the restaurant industry, we possibly could have had the heaviest blow to our business, and not even just to our business on an economic perspective, but also just how consumers are now interacting with restaurants and the food service industry altogether. As a restaurant group, Richard Sandoval Hospitality is in a bit of a unique position. We own and operate restaurants across the U.S., and so our consumer footprint has been very much affected in the fact that we had to close all of our restaurants. And then on the other side of our business, we have a lot of licensing businesses. So we work with hotel ownership groups, mainly luxury hotels, and they contract us or license us out to be the restaurant of choice in the hotel that they own. And so with travel also being down, hotel occupancy being down, a lot of dining outlets were also, mandated by state governments to shut down. So we kind of had a little bit of impact from both sides, both in our owned and operated side of the business, as well as our licensing with hotels. So we really started to see the impact of COVID-19 around early March, when a lot of conventions, wedding parties, events started to kind of pull back in their bookings with us. We thought that would be kind of where it ended. And then, we started to get federal, state, city mandates and executive orders to shut down restaurants. So while a lot of restaurants have kind of taken on a new approach to how they interact with their consumers from a, now online ordering or curbside pickup, we have not taken that approach. We're very much a chef-driven concept. To be quite honest, like, our food doesn't travel that well. A lot of our dishes are very complex. They have a lot of ingredients. It's a lot of plate presentation. It's a little bit more involved, a little bit more high impact than, for example, like ordering pizza. So with that in mind, we did not take the route of doing online ordering or the to-go route. We have very much shut down our operations. It does, from a financial perspective, it didn't make sense to keep on labor, the cost of product for very little revenues. Even before COVID-19, online ordering, delivery, to-go orders were not a huge component of our business. They're definitely important and definitely kind of a trend in which restaurants are going. But that wasn't a big component of our business. And so with that, closing all of our restaurants, and then also having our licensing partners in many cases either reduce hours within the hotel for the restaurants or close them altogether, we also were impacted by the fact that we pretty much have everyone in our company is furloughed from a corporate perspective. So our marketing team, and then also management in the restaurant, front of house, back of house is pretty much at a standstill right now until we get orders state by state to reopen. So with that being said, from a marketing perspective, we're pretty much on a freeze. There is really no marketing right now. We shut off all paid campaigns. We are very focused around a lot of our marketing is event-based or programming-based. So, we had Easter. That's a big revenue driver for us, as is we have Cinco de Mayo, being a Mexican restaurant group. That's the biggest day of the year. We're most likely not going to be able to participate in that as it's next week. Looking ahead, we had a big convention season in a lot of our cities that we're not going to see revenues from. So overall, I think our business particularly is just very anxious to get back to a stream where we have revenues, where we can open. With that being said, I don't think the light is going to be switched on and everyone's going to go back to dining the way they used to. I think there's some light coming ahead, especially like states like Georgia, which we have a restaurant in Atlanta. They have officially been allowed to open. And then the issue that we're kind of going to be facing is that, just because the state says we can reopen a restaurant doesn't mean that it's going to go back to the way it was. We will likely have to adapt with, the fear of people wanting to dine or being in close contact. It's likely that the restaurants in most states that are starting to reopen, most states aren't allowing full occupancy of the restaurants. Only 50% of fire code is allowed to be seated. They can't have any groups of 6 or more dining within the restaurant. Bars are not allowed to open as of yet. So I think there's this hope that things are going to start to move, or we're going to start to be able to reopen in some states. Some states are going to take longer, like New York. We have several restaurants in New York that it's going to be a much longer pathway, longer journey to get back to business. But I think once we do reopen, I think just looking at trends, we're going to see a massive spike in traffic because I think people are anxious. People are sitting at home. They're over this. I constantly see on my Instagram feed, moms at home, they're just sick of cooking, or, families sick of cooking at home or eating their own food. And even with options like Uber Eats and DoorDash and Postmates, it's just not the same. The quality typically isn't the same. And you're obviously not having that kind of human interaction, that social interaction. So I think people are very anxious and just want things to go back to where they were. I know like so many of my friends that I speak to are just like, I just want to go to a restaurant. I just want to go to happy hour and, get out of the house. So I think we're going to see some initial positive kind of upward trajectory spikes in traffic. But then I think people are going to still, on the flip side, be fearful of dining out and making sure that, there is that social distancing within a restaurant. Luckily for us, we do, for the most part, have quite large spaces. And so we can be creative and flexible on how we kind of design and map out dining rooms. But I think, this is just the beginning for restaurants. There's an uphill kind of mountain to climb, I would say, in getting back to normal. I think we're definitely going to have to, from a marketing perspective, take on new strategies, focusing on shifting a lot of our business either online or to order, really start leveraging third-party delivery services, since we weren't really we were in the game, but I would say it wasn't a focal point of our business. The other thing that I think is very top of mind is that when we do have the ability to start reopening, we're going to have to rethink our menu strategy. Potentially, our menus can't be that big. They have to be more focused. We also, in a lot of our concepts, we have a lot of like shareable menus. So it's like tapas style, where the concept is that you order a bunch for the table and then it's very shareable. It's a social moment. It really celebrates Latin culture of socializing and sharing and being with each other. I think that's going to have to be rethought. A lot of our concepts have bottomless brunch, where typically brunch is in bigger groups and you're socializing and there's a lot of gathering. Bottomless plates probably aren't going to be an option anymore with the whole kind of cross contamination or sharing, which is, not advised at this time. So I think, there's light and hope that things are going to, somewhat start to reopen, especially with the last couple of weeks, getting news that several states are reopening. But again, I think we have a long journey ahead of us. So with that, again, hope everyone is staying safe and healthy and social distancing from one another. But with that, I will turn it back to Amin to see if there are any questions.
Thank you so much, Natalie. Really appreciate it. And I appreciate your, being very candid with us and telling us the reality of even your own experience right now with Richard Sandoval and the impact that you guys have experienced. And I know, like, as you mentioned, you started feeling the impact early on in March when people started canceling weddings and events. And actually, the question is about that. It's about conventions and weddings and events. I know a lot of people are hoping or have been pushing to Q4. Yes. Are you guys getting a little like people or calls where people are letting you know that, hey, we're moving this to Q? Are you getting a little bit of that, or is it like, hey, we're just canceling the order and we'll call you whenever we know?
Sure. Yes. So it's a little bit of both. So for example, conventions, which typically, they post their schedule anywhere from 6 months to a year out. One of our restaurants specifically is in downtown Denver and it's right by the convention center. So we get a lot of business from convention seasons. A lot of conventions have been pushed to Q4, like you said. So we haven't had necessary cancellation, but then it very much even just thinking when we do reopen, our budgets are going to have to totally be reworked, because the budgets, especially our event sales budgets, were very much contingent on the calendar of events that happened or that were going to happen in that quarter or period, for example. Those seem like they're going to shift. I do have, just being, taking a pragmatic approach, I think a lot will be canceled and not just moved to Q4. When it comes to social events, I think also our event business is quite dynamic. Like we have a lot of corporate events, and then we also have a lot of like smaller social events, like something like a wedding rehearsal or a graduation party. At this time, those are just, completely canceled. So there is that loss in revenue from them. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag. I think we're hopeful to see that hopefully conventions will continue into Q4, but a lot of like these smaller kind of more social gatherings, definitely not as high of a revenue value, but it adds up when you have multiple, especially into spring. That's typically when we see a huge spike in event traffic, especially some of our restaurants that have, rooftop patios or really, beautiful outdoor spaces. And this is, the season when things are starting to brighten up and people want to get outside. So I think we are going to have to deal with the loss of that and come up with strategic ways to basically recreate that revenue when we have the opportunity to.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Natalie, again, for all of your insight and for being here with us today.
Of course. Thank you.
And our next speaker is Jerry Huang, who is the SVP of Product Innovation and Development at Rosetta Stone. He oversees all of Rosetta Stone's language learning digital products around the world. He's got over 20 years experience in technology operations with specialty in retail and edtech industries. Jerry, thanks for being here with us today.
Absolutely. And thanks to the prior speakers for sharing their stories. I'm happy to share Rosetta Stone's story. I have a few slides that might help anchor us in our conversation. I'll do a screen share here.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Hopefully everybody can see my screen and my presentation.
Yes, we can.
All right. So I'll talk a little bit about Rosetta Stone and kind of how all of this worldwide events are impacting us, especially in our business and more specifically to our learners. So I'm Jerry Huang. I am the Senior Vice President. I oversee all of our global products. These are our learner products. And we service pretty much over 1 million plus active learners around the world, all the way from kindergarten to adult life learners. And that kind of symbolizes who we are and our mission, our vision. Our mission is to change lives through the power of language and literacy education. And what we feel and what we see is that every person can learn to read, write, and speak with confidence, because at the core nature of any human interaction is the ability to communicate well, share stories, ask for help, be a mentor, etc. And this is what guides us in everything we do, whether it's our products, our messaging, how we work with our enterprise clients, all the way to our elementary schools, as well as to individual learners around the world. And just to give a little background, because I know a lot of people, Rosetta Stone is a well-known brand, especially here in the United States. We have over about 90% plus aided brand awareness. But what some people still think of us as the old yellow box in the airport kiosk. By the way, we haven't had an airport kiosk in over 5 years, and we stopped selling yellow boxes over 2 years ago. And so what we have to offer, and this is quite relevant to how we address the pandemic situation around the world, is what we have is an actual immersive blended learning curriculum. When we mean blended is we have aspects of digital learning. So we have apps both on web and mobile platforms, but we also have, down at the bottom, we have real human beings teaching live. So we have live tutors, we have live streams. We just started live streams actually, and live classes that are connecting learners, adult and children, all over the world. And they're learning 24 plus languages. We also serve Native American tribes in preserving their endangered languages. As their speaker base starts to dwindle, we take their language, we work with their elders and their tribal councils and preserve those languages, and then allow their younger generations to be able to enjoy both the culture as well as the language itself. And so we have over 7,000 hours of content, and we use AI for speech recognition so we can help you actually speak with confidence, speak correctly, pronounce correctly. And we do this aligned with standards around the world. For language, we use the Common European Framework. And for literacy, we use all the K-12 standards like Common Core, WIDA, etc. As we entered this new situation, both from the fact of the pandemic, but also as we looked at the economic situation that was happening around the world, because we serve all types of learners as well as clients. We serve Fortune 500 clients that are represented by some of the speakers in the same industries, service and hospitality industry. We started to think about, and this goes back to our mission, our vision, what do we have today that we can help provide value? And it comes from a source of what does the learner need and what do the clients need? And then how can we be there for them at this moment? Because they all face the same situation as we're facing. And we are very fortunate to have a product that works really well for those that have to stay at home. And then understand what are the impacts both on an individual level as well as that corporate level, and what services can we provide to that group, and accelerate, if possible, anything on our roadmap, reprioritize, look ahead and bring forward things that maybe were down the roadmap, but now are even more meaningful. And it goes back to being super agile. I believe Jessica talked about how can you be agile and adjust with the times. And that's what we did, was we looked at our roadmap and see what's relevant today. And some things our team, and this all came from our team, which was amazing. And I think partly because they empathize, they're part of this new situation. And we now know that with schools closing, kids are at home. And even ourselves, I'm a parent as well, we started to struggle with learning at home, distance learning. I know the school systems also struggled with that. And somehow my kids have figured out how to do 6 hours of schoolwork in an hour and a half. I still wonder what's going on over there. And so now there's this whole thing of how do I keep our kids engaged, but in a way that's meaningful, useful, and really helps them. And so what we decided is we took our homeschool product and we made it available free for every parent out there in the world. And this alone was picked up very well. And we were very proud to be able to do this for parents all over the world. We had stories of, we see people, we got Facebook videos of students trying to speak Japanese who's never been even exposed to that language. We do 24 languages. So we have languages like Hebrew and Arabic, Irish. And so a lot of kids are actually connecting with their roots and starting to understand a little bit more about where they came from. So it was a great moment. And this was one of the ideas that came from our teams. And we were so proud of them to think through this, that we felt like, wow, let's do this. And then we also realized pretty quickly that there was a strong desire for social interaction. In language, especially in language world, it is about speaking, interacting, connecting with a global community. And what we did was we said, we have an amazing tutoring base, and they do a wonderful job. Their customer satisfaction rate is 95% or higher, and they teach people from all over the world, and they know how to interact. Why don't we bring them all together, give our learners free live coaching, and have that social interaction, and let them also practice that language skill that they've been, working super hard, and experience that with someone, learn about culture too. And so now we can expand not only their language horizon, but also learn more about the culture that they're from that language, regarding that language. And then what we did was we pulled some things from our roadmap. I mentioned earlier, we had in our roadmap this concept of doing live streams, just like we're doing today with this webinar, but bringing our amazing coaches to the forefront in a consumable way. Live tutoring, while it's amazing and you can connect and have that interaction, it can be daunting if you've never done it before, but live stream is a really low barrier, low friction, but still with live chat and interacting, and you can learn, as well as you can learn with 500 other, we did our first live stream in Spanish, and we had 500 people come in, and they were talking to each other, this is Coach Elizabeth, she's one of our best tutors, and asking her questions. We posted an on-demand video. She did this about food from her region. So it was a really great moment to see. And I'll give you an example. Her video went out in one of her live sessions, because now live streaming is becoming such a big thing. The capacity for all of these companies are starting to get hit, and her video and audio went out, and we thought, oh no, we're going to lose all these folks. And no, they still continued. The live chat was working, and they kept interacting with her and with each other. And it's just this desire for social interaction, but through a digital media, was really impactful. And we were, again, these are all ideas that spawned from either our roadmap that was from our product team, or from our other marketing teams, for example. And I know there was a couple of questions about how do you engage with your learners, and how do you, have the right message and not be tone deaf, for example, or ignorant to what's going on. And ultimately, I suggest talking to your people, because they're going through the same thing. And ultimately, it's about empathy. I'm pretty positive that we'll come out strong. We'll make it through, and we'll come out stronger. And I think we have about 1,000 employees, and if you listen, because they're all going through the same thing as your customers, they have a lot of great ideas, and a lot of times that kind of message and tone can help guide your message and tone to your customers. And there are times when you need to be serious and you need to empathize. And then we also need to recognize that sometimes we're too serious, right? We need to take a moment and realize we're all in this together. And so again, this is actually, I was going to show a video here. Hopefully the video and the audio comes through, but this was something our team came up again from our marketing team directly. Some guys took some videos, and we got the licensing from the TikTok. Someone mentioned about using TikTok, the massive explosion of TikTok everybody keeps talking about. So we had the team compile a little montage, and it resonated really well with the whole organization and with our customers. So if you guys will indulge me, I'll play it. It's only 30 seconds here. Hopefully the audio comes out okay. hopefully the audio went through okay there. But yeah, you know, there's everybody's going through this at some level, and again, it's how we listen and talk to them as well. And through all this, in as we look at marketing and the aspects of this, everybody's talking about the situation, and I think there is a strong desire to talk about, you know, obviously the seriousness and what's going on, but there's also the opportunity to let folks know what's out there, what you know, not only what we can do to help, but what others can do to help. And, you know, the media has picked up on this. And again, we're really proud of what we've been able to do in these tough times. And look, we're going to face tough times too. We have clients that are, you know, again, in these same industries as represented here. And our message to them is, we're here for you. Just let us know what we can do for you. We're not going to hound you with sales calls. There's no point, right? You have other things that are more important. Take care of your employees and your customers. But in the meantime, how can we help? We've given licenses out to folks in the service industry that, you know, aren't even our clients. Not because we want to close a deal per se, but we empathize with them, and we know exactly the same process that they're going through, we're going through. As a leader in my company, we're having those tough conversations. And so we're here for them while we can be. And if there's anything they need, we do what we can for them at the same time. So again, back to, it's really about listening and really honing in and being there when you can. And then if there's anything we can give and serve, then we do our best to do that. And I found our employees to be a massive resource through that. And as we look ahead, and sometimes it's also pretty tough to look ahead because you're looking at the day-to-day. You know, again, we all have to have that strong belief that we will come out of this even stronger. And we want to take the chance and opportunity to make those investments where it does have both near-term and long-term. And again, it goes back to our mission and vision, is supporting our learners and understanding their perspective. And then listening to our clients, both schools and corporations. And again, knowing what's their pain points and what they're going through. And then anticipating and trying to anticipate what their needs will be as they exit out of this. Because that's where we can be super helpful through that. And then again, looking back at who you are, you as a brand, as a company, and really digging deep into what drives your organization, what makes your brand strong, what makes your product strong, and believing in that and investing in that. So thank you. I'm open for questions. Hand it back to Amin.
Thank you so much, Jerry, and I appreciate you sharing with us how you guys, I mean, from what you've shared, it looks like you've done a great job leveraging TikTok to create kind of a fun video. I've seen, I think, one of the videos on TikTok that was really trending with I think the son with his mom or grandma playing, and like there was so many cool content in TikTok, and you guys leverage that, which is very awesome. And also how you pretty much, even though that was not the intent, you were able to get a lot of free PR just for doing the right thing. And I know Jessica at the beginning, when she talked about like brands that are doing the right thing are going to be remembered once we're back to normal. And I think the Rosetta Stone is definitely leading the way there. With that, I have a question that I've received about, have the effects been different or similar across nations? Are you guys, since you guys are a global company, are you shifting more of your, I know a lot of your contact is online anyways now. Yeah. Are you shifting more traditional dollars to digital marketing in Korea like you're doing in the US? Or what kind of shifts from a marketing perspective are you guys experiencing globally?
Yeah, so we actually, so globally, we're pretty strong in the US, Canada, and Western Europe. primarily. We're not as strong in other outlying markets. And we did have to look at, we had expansion plans internationally as we looked in Asia, for example, I mean, you mentioned. And what we decided to do is a couple of things. One was, as we were looking at spend, look at where our learners, our potential clients are spending time on, like you guys mentioned, a lot more digital. Social media has been a huge aspect because people are reaching out to us particularly. We did re-examine our digital paid, and again, just being super optimal about it. Our European business is doing pretty well from a consumer side. And so we are looking at how can we expand in further countries outside of Western Europe and further into Europe as well. And again, from an enterprise side, that's been a traditional kind of sales approach. And we've just been reaching out to folks and saying, how can we help? That's really the only message we give to them. We don't try to push, of course, if we can have an opportunity to make a sale, we will. But right now, our message is, how can we help?
Awesome. And we do have one last question for you, Jerry. And the question is, in addition to the shift in work and school environment, there is also the aspect of people's minds being elsewhere with all of the anxiety caused by by COVID-19. How would you say your company has had to adjust to help customers focus and really absorb information during their learning when their minds might sometimes be elsewhere?
That's a really good question. And actually, that's actually where our live streams were kind of born out of. So the idea was, look, social distancing means I have less social interactions. And while, you can FaceTime and whatnot, there was a need to, as they're going through this, a lot of our folks are they learn Spanish because they're going to go travel to Latin America. They're learning French because they were going to have that wonderful trip to Paris, and all of those trips are canceled. Or they're learning, I had someone learning Hebrew because they wanted to be able to speak to their in-laws. And all of these great stories where they could connect, and now they don't have that opportunity to travel and do that. And so by having these live streams, this is exactly how it allows them to kind of be there without being there. And continue that. So we know, so in the education world, we know that kind of the number one metric we always try to get is engagement. And our live streams and our tutoring, our tutoring has always driven high level of engagement, but it's also kind of a high friction, meaning it's tough. You get a schedule, you have a little bit of anxiety. Do I look okay? Did I practice my homework? But with live stream, those barriers are a lot lower, and we implemented that literally in less than 7 days into our product because our teams were so hyped up about it. They wanted to do this so people could have more interaction. So absolutely, it helps keep them focused and realize there is still a world out there, even though I've been literally sitting in my office for 10 hours.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jerry, for all of your insights. And thank you again for your time. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Our next speaker is Randy Charles. Randy serves as the head of marketing for Facet Wealth, which is an innovative fintech company that enables access to high quality financial planning for everyday American families. Definitely an industry, that's seeing a lot of change right now. Prior to that, she was the head or led teams at Talkspace, which is an online therapy app, Blue Apron. She was also, she worked for American Express, was the director of digital acquisitions there, worked for Hilton. Randy has worked across a lot of different industries and has held a lot of very good jobs in great positions with very big, either cool startups or very well-established companies. And we're really glad to have her here with us today.
Thank you. It's great to be here and hear from so many different industries. I think what we've seen is that the challenges of this pandemic are just manifesting themselves in very different ways. And it's really cool to just see a bunch of people come together and share some of those insights. So as you mentioned, I lead marketing for Facet Wealth, which is a fintech startup that's focused on democratizing access to high quality financial planning. We focus on the 33 million plus mass affluent households in America and ensuring that they can access services that have previously only been available to those with large portfolios of investable assets. So hopefully that gives some context as to some of what I'll share today. The financial services industry has really had a mixed bag of results since the onset of the pandemic. So let's start with a little bit about what we do know. Jessica actually surfaced some of these points in her presentation earlier. So we know that unemployment is high. We know that the market is extremely volatile. We know that the Fed has cut interest rates. And when we think about how some of that pans out in the financial services space, financial advisory is largely a recurring revenue model. So this means fees are most often charged either as a percentage of assets in an investment account or annual fees for working with an advisor. So we're typically looking at longer sales cycles and long-term relationships with clients. So this is definitely different than some of your more commerce or transactional based businesses. Definitely much more of a considered purchase, and again, that recurring revenue. So what does all of this mean for our prospect and client base? Some of the things that we've seen so far is that there's definitely an increased need for advice and guidance. So people are starting to encounter questions like, what does this all mean for me if I'm about to retire? Or what if I'm actually living on a fixed income in retirement already? They see actions like the interest rate cuts and they start to think, should I be refinancing a mortgage? They see some of the market volatility and wonder, is now actually an attractive time to invest because prices are low, or is it actually inherently more risky and I should be looking to stuff my mattress with cash? And they often don't have high quality, credible sources of places to get answers to those questions. But what they do have right now is the time to look for those answers. And so we've actually seen a pretty high uptick across the board in browsing intent. People are engaging really heavily with content, particularly while they're at home. They're reading a lot more, they're engaging with Q&As, they are submitting more. We host webinars fairly regularly for our business, and we've seen huge increases in the amount of questions we get in advance since all of this started. So it's just an indicator that people are actually being a bit more thoughtful and intentional about their quest for answers to some of these key factors that will drive a lot of their financial life. Additionally, in financial services, we haven't quite seen some of the really sharp declines in CPMs or discounts on various media formats. And this is because there are a lot of content aggregators in the space. So it's an ideal time for content marketers in financial services. And really that means that the saturation of media hasn't necessarily taken that backseat quite yet. So that's a broad set of considerations, but that's just a few things that are really top of mind as we're navigating this. What I tried to do next and wanted to talk to you all about is think about how does this actually translate to the challenges at hand for marketers, whether you're on the acquisition or the retention side. So I thought let's start with the acquisition side. Generally, across the board, you should expect to see longer sales cycles. So we see, while people have that high level of browsing intent, they are looking for content and they're definitely interested in the services that we provide in the realm of financial advisory. They're more hesitant to make big purchase decisions. So I think for marketers, this is a really good opportunity to revisit and innovate on the lead nurture campaigns that you have in flight today. The second thing I'd talk about there is that it's a really good time to continue to foster a culture of experimentation. With more users that are browsing, there are inherently more opportunities to capture their attention. One of the traps of social distancing and some of the stay-at-home life is that it can be really easy to adopt a task-based approach to your day. You could sit down and say, okay, I just have to get through work and get through what's on my list and operate within the confines of what you know. But I really do believe that the companies that will win and come out on top of all of this are the ones that embrace this time and use it to innovate and revisit some of their past assumptions. So you may have tested and vetted channels or ad formats and said, okay, we've concluded this doesn't work for us, so we're not going to do it. Well, the world's a little bit of a different place right now, and it's a good chance to actually see if some of those tactics that you may have parked previously could actually be quite beneficial now. A couple of things that have been particularly top of mind for us as we're thinking with that lens has definitely been SMS messaging, particularly in that lead nurture funnel, and programmatic direct mail. So both of those probably seem very analog for a panel that's focused on digital, but there's a really good opportunity here to tie together your online and offline strategies and revisit those multifaceted ways to get in front of your users. Programmatic direct mail in particular, really powerful way to retarget your site visitors and your funnel dropouts with a completely different experience than where they first discovered you. So that's probably on the acquisition side of the house. On the retention and engagement side of the house, financial planning is often viewed as discretionary spend. So the value of the service is really kind of intangible, and the opportunity to reap the benefits can often be years or even decades away. You know, a lot of people think that it's work you put in now, but you don't really feel it until you get to retirement. So there's a challenge there because we're at this point in time where people are rigorously evaluating their discretionary spend and expenses. The critical challenge at hand for retention and engagement marketers is to expedite and perpetually reinforce that cost to value reconciliation. So when I get more specific into our space, what I would say is that there's two considerations for typical clients of financial advisory firms that I'd highlight here. So the first is, generally speaking, clients derive value from face-to-face interactions. So even if they can't see that return on investment, they typically see a lot of value and feel accomplished when they go to a bank, they shake an advisor's hand, they leave with paperwork. And second, when choosing a financial services provider in a pre-pandemic world, clients were fairly tolerant of the time frame that it would take to see that value, to see returns on their assets or make progress towards their financial goals. And the current state of the world has kind of turned these two value props on their head and turned them into real challenges for engagement marketers within the space. So at Facet, we're a remote advisory practice. So we've been building a product that fosters that sense of value, builds relationships without that handshake for many years prior to COVID-19. But I do believe that this current situation highlights the need for businesses to really double down on ways that they can foster engagement when in-person interaction isn't possible. The other thing that I would call out here is it's a good time to kind of ask yourself the question, what digital experiences and interactions can I provide to my client base that enables them to have that positive cost to value reconciliation in an expedited and remote type of environment? So that could be done through content, through forum meetings with experts, through assessments. We've seen a lot of uptake in users engaging with things like retirement calculators or quizzes. People love something tangible that they can sort of use to gain some information about themselves, and also content that they can share with others. And then the last piece I would say is this is also a really important moment to reward loyalty. You should be revisiting the programs you have in place to let your clients know that you're grateful for their business, for your relationship with them, and the opportunity to work with them to achieve their goals. Certainly don't make the assumption that clients that you've had for a really long time will continue to be clients forever, because that's just the way it is. You know, again, this is a time where I think users are really rigorously evaluating, particularly discretionary spend. And if you want to come out on the right side of that, you have to find ways to demonstrate your value, even with the clients that sometimes can take a backseat in marketing plans. So in short, given the long-term nature of our industry, the impact of COVID-19 is still a little bit murky, but we do know that there are a few things that I think businesses should focus on, regardless of that clear data of what's happening here. So just to recap, focusing on those lead nurture campaigns and assuming that there will be significantly longer sales cycles, experimenting into new acquisition channels and revisiting those ones that you've previously tested. So certainly question and challenge your past assumptions. Third, focus on ensuring that your early tenure clients can realize the value of the relationship and service you provide quickly. This will help make sure that they don't feel like you are a disposable expense. And lastly, look to reward loyalty by further demonstrating value. So again, as I said, not the time to assume that clients who have been with you for a long time will remain with you forever. So there's a lot of learning. I think we're really focused day to day on challenging our team to be innovative, forward thinking, and the advice that we give to our clients is to think about your goals in the long term when you think about your financial picture. And that's really what we're doing in-house, as well as just planning for the business that we want when we all start to come out on the other side of this. So Amin, with that, I will turn it back to you, and thank you again for having me.
Thank you so much, Randy. Really appreciate your insight, and I love that you went, through kind of the three core that you guys are working on, and lead nurturing. And you are completely right. The sales cycle is definitely a lot longer now. However, that doesn't mean that we should stop talking to our prospects and to our leads and continue the conversation. Have you guys experienced any differences in terms of budget shifts between, let's say, Facebook, Google, organic content because of what's going on? Have you been shifting dollars around, or how has that experience been?
It's a good question. I would say we've been pretty focused on investing in channels that allow for more content-based marketing. So where we can actually share points of view on things like investment management philosophy or other services that we provide, because this is a product that really warrants much more of an explanation. It's not one where we can throw up an image and say, click this, you want to buy this. So it's the channels that allow for a bit more interaction that are much more appealing to us at a time like this.
And I know because of your background, you have literally worked, both in, again, AMX, Talkspace, which is an online therapy, Blue Apron for food delivery or food prep service. What do you think the other industries where you have a lot of experience in are experiencing? I know, for instance, therapy is big right now. Like I see a lot of ads, even from Talkspace. I know you were the head of marketing there. Mm-hmm. So how do you think the other industries are experiencing COVID, and how are they, again, shifting budgets because of what's going on?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a great question. I think with something like therapy, what you're seeing right now is a great approach by Talkspace, where they're certainly focused on making people know that there are options available to them, but they're doing so with a really muted and empathetic tone, right? So they're focused on letting users know that this is a service that can help them, and it's not really the buy now, click here, save this types of strategies that we see in a more traditional environment. So there's a level of sensitivity that's required of the time. And again, certain channels will be more conducive to that. So that actually is a really nice moment for like connected TV, for podcast sponsorships, where it's not that instant ad that's driving an instant transaction. And I think that's where you're starting to see them start to come up, as well as several others in the telehealth space. And every business kind of has some inherent opportunity, like Blue Apron. There's a huge demand for meal delivery now, particularly as we're starting to see small traces of like supply chain disruption in grocery, and many users thinking about homebound solutions. So so there's some interesting moments across the board, but I think again, those channels that allow for brands to really speak about their products and foster somewhat of a connection with their prospects are the ones that remain the most attractive.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Randy, for your time. Really, really appreciate all of your insight, and thanks for joining us.
Of course, thank you.
All right, and our last speaker is Mr. Douglas Wong, who is the VP of Marketing at Rave. Rave is the company that owns Pi5, for those of you who are based in Dallas and certain states where Pi5 has a presence. Prior to that, he was the Director of E-commerce and Digital Media at Payway. He was also the Director of Digital Marketing at CC's Pizza, and he's worked in hospitality, including for Hilton Worldwide, as well as Choice Hotels. Douglas, thank you so much for joining us. I know you are in the middle of reopening some of your restaurants today, and would love to hear again a little bit about the impact of COVID on your business, both on the franchise side as well as the restaurant side, and also how you guys have been shifting dollars and marketing efforts during this time.
Sure. Thanks, Amin. Let me just first start off by saying thank you for the opportunity to be here. I definitely learned a lot from each of the panelists here, and have actually been fortunate enough to work with a handful of them, including you. And it's been interesting to see how this crisis, this global crisis, has affected each of us. You know, and it's been good to be able to come back together and connect. And you know, given this team here, I feel good about our chances of coming out of it because we're all asking the right questions. But with that being said, I'll just go ahead and jump right into it. I'm going to start by, you know, kind of talking through how this whole pandemic has affected the guest. I'm not going to go into too much detail because all of us are experiencing it. All of us need to eat, so we know. I'm just going to share some data points. Then I'll go specifically into the business portion of it, and I'll answer more of your questions that you just brought up, Amin. So some of the data that we looked at gave us some insight into talking about how consumer confidence is declining, and that's no surprise. But the interesting thing about the underlying support behind the data is it's showing that there is a little bit of optimism because this economic event is actually self-imposed by global governments everywhere. And it was asked by this company named Data Essentials. They're a consumer research company that does a lot of work in the food service space. You know, Natalie probably gets some data from them as well. They asked the question to a few of their respondents spread out over the country: are you more concerned with an economic event or a health event? And 60% of them said that they were more concerned about the public health. So, you know, they're looking at this and more about, you know, trying to take care of themselves versus, you know, worrying about their wallets. And actually got some data from the chief economist from Coke, who was noticing kind of the same things. If you look at the measurements of how you evaluate economic health, it's really two main factors. One is your own personal wealth, and two is your willingness to spend. And even though, you know, it was covered a little bit earlier how there's so many unemployment claims right now, wealth in general is tighter, but it's not as bad as it's been before in previous, you know, economic events before in the past. I think the thing that people are most concerned with now are the willingness to spend. So even though people may have money, or at least they may have some set aside, they don't know how the economy is going to respond to businesses reopening. So there's a lot of caution there. But the wealth is, although it's a little bit tighter, it's not dwindling to where it was back in, you know, 2008, 2001, and those types of things. So, you know, when we look at purchase habits and how this affected everybody at the beginning, as dining rooms began to close and more news came out about this, grocery stores blew up, dining rooms had to close. And over time, people began to sort of exhaust all of their recipes that they had at home. And we've actually seen in our businesses, both for Pie 5, our fast casual business, and Pizza Inn, our pizza buffet business, they've actually kind of endured a lot of this and weathered the storm. We're actually lucky that we're in the pizza business because we were able to transition pretty easily to curbside and to go, as Natalie kind of touched on earlier. And we actually launched a brand new concept called the Contactless Buffet to Go, where you add more choice and variety to guests, kind of giving them that whole buffet feel and the buffet value proposition in the safety and comfort of their own home. So, you know, over time, people were more and more just trying to either eat out or get out of the house and begin to order out more. And it's actually served us well. Now, I'm not gonna paint the picture that it's, you know, we're doing great and it's all, you know, rainbows. We're growing absolutely in our online ordering business, but it's not enough to offset what we're doing for dine-in. We were just well positioned to be able to keep our restaurants open, and that's a huge win. One thing that I think is important to talk about is Natalie mentioned that a lot of states are beginning to reopen, and some of the data that we've seen suggests that consumers feel like it's a little too early. Now, here in Texas, we actually had Colleyville open at the end of last weekend, but it was for patio seating only. And people were just stir crazy, and they flocked to all the restaurants that had patio service just to be able to get out of their house and enjoy a meal. And, you know, largely, I think we're going to see, you know, kind of two split groups. There's going to be one group that'll go out and they'll dine cautiously, which I think will be predominantly what's going to happen. And then there's going to be another group that's just going to, you know, kind of say, okay, it's open. I'm going to go back to life as normal. But the data that we've seen suggests that more people will go out, but they're going to retain their precautionary measures. The good thing about that, though, is people understand, I think, how important restaurants are to their local economies and to the global economy in general. And there is motivation to go out there and help businesses recover. So there's a lot of talk about, you know, once restaurants begin to open, if they take the right precautionary steps and create a responsible and safe environment, they want to go out and create more business for the restaurants to help them recover. You know, so with all that being said, I think from a guest perspective, in summary, it's viewed as more of a health crisis for now. And even though money's tighter, there's optimism, but it's going to take me into the next point, which is, you know, the visual cleanliness is going to be extremely important for operators and how they think about reopening the business. It's absolutely going to fundamentally change, especially with a lot of states requiring things like masks if you're out in public, or, you know, social distancing is absolutely going to be a thing. We've actually implemented a few of those changes at some of our restaurants. So tomorrow, we're going to have all of our DFW restaurants, with the exception of a couple, one's in a mall and another's on a college campus. All of them are going to be opening up with these precautionary measures in place, where we're going to make sure that all team members are wearing gloves, all team members are wearing masks, all team members are going to have their temperature checked before they start their shift. We're going to shut down the drink station so there's no communal area and there's less interaction, I think, for people to, you know, go and congregate around. And we're also going to serve all of our pizzas in boxes. So regardless of whether you order for dine-in or takeout, your pizza is going to come in a box to make sure that there's that added closure for your food. The other things that we're doing is we're implementing decals on the floor, not necessarily for direction, because it's pretty clear what direction you need to go to order your food and get your food, but more so for social distancing and spacing. We want to make sure that we keep all team members and guests safe by keeping proper distance apart from each other. We're also putting in more sanitizing stations across the restaurant dining rooms, as well as adhering to the local guidelines of Texas, which said that dining rooms can be open, but at 25% capacity. So we're moving things around in the dining room to make sure guests aren't too close to each other, to make sure we adhere to those guidelines. Now, again, I think one thing that's going to be important is making sure you service the guests where they're going to be looking for you. Not everybody's going to flock into the restaurant. I think one concern is, you know, if we're opening the dining room, is that an incremental guest, or is that somebody who had been ordering online with you for a while and then just decides to come in? Now, either way, you know, restaurants are going to want the business for sure, but it's just kind of one of the things that we're thinking about as we open up the doors to our restaurants. So the other thing that we're looking at as well is potentially putting in, you know, some plexiglass at registers and doing some things to protect team members as well. But, you know, in summary, restaurants are going to recognize that the guest concern over health will likely remain as the business is open. So the operational updates are going to have to really kind of be in your face. I mean, think about it from the perspective of a guest. When you go to the grocery store, you know that those carts are cleaned and sanitized, you know, based on, you know, how they're communicating with guests, or at least, you know, you kind of hope they are. But there's something to be said about, you know, the peace of mind you get when you visually see somebody spraying down and wiping down the cart handles before they hand it to you. It's going to be the same thing in the restaurants. People are going to want to need to see sort of the in-your-face changes in order to feel safe. The other thing that I think is going to be really important as well is the tech stack. It's going to be more important now than ever. So things like online ordering, loyalty, and even the back of house technology is going to need to be really important and streamlined, because labor is most likely going to go up in the restaurants. We're going to have to make sure that we take advantage of take care of guests to the team members' advantage in a way that keeps them safe. So, you know, all the things that Natalie had spoken about earlier with, you know, trying to go into Uber Eats and DoorDash and Postmates, that actually works out well for our business model and QSR and fast casual, because it helps us to expand our commerce platform. You know, if you think about we want people to come to us and be able to order directly. That's the first thing we need to take care of. But the second thing is whenever somebody opens up the DoorDash app or the Uber Eats app, we want them to be able to see us so that they can consider our brands for food or for dining if they wouldn't have before. So we're also looking at, kind of those platforms as well to enhance our sort of incrementality and visibility. So, that was kind of a quick and dirty way of how we're looking at it. I didn't want to take up too much time because I know Natalie already touched on a lot of the food service space, but that's just kind of how we're viewing it from the fast casual and QSR segment. So with that, I'll go and pass it back over to you, Amin.
Thank you so much, Doug, for going over. And so as far as marketing goes, I know you guys probably had to kind of shift more towards running ads, to promote your order, your online ordering, your buffet. Were you shifting more like dollars towards social, or what kind of channels did you guys put in more of the efforts into?
Yeah, it was mostly towards social, but it was based on what we'd known before, how our guests reacted to us. So we dabbled a little bit in paid search, dabbled a little bit in display, and dabbled a little bit in social media. And social media tended to give us the best return, the best engagement, the best response. So once everything happened and budgets began to, kind of dwindle away, we pushed that all towards social, and obviously focused the message on to-go delivery and takeout. And it was mostly built around awareness. In the pizza space, it can get really dangerous if you start to try to play the game of, value, because Domino's, Pizza Hut, and Papa John's will just destroy anybody that tries to move into that space. That's what caused us to, kind of have to move towards this contactless buffet to go program. So we really did things where we pushed more towards awareness, contactless buffet to go, things where we could be, sort of differentiated, and not try to do too much of the, kind of dealing to play in the space of Domino's.
Got it. Perfect. The last question that I have for you is, how are you letting your customers know what your new policies look like?
It's really interesting. As we think about, how the state guidelines are kind of playing a huge factor in how restaurants reopen, we're mainly just going to open the doors, see how guests react, see if, we need to change some things to make them feel safer, see, what team members are saying and get franchisee feedback. But we're really not planning on doing a big marketing push until the social distancing guidelines ease up. Because what we don't want to have happen is we push too much traffic into the restaurants, and we can't let them in the building, and it just creates this bad experience. So really what we're trying to do is just open up the doors, test the water, see what happens, and then we'll begin to pump in a little bit more marketing as states ease their social distancing guidelines and regulations. And then once they're done and then they're out of the way, then I think, at that point it's, getting back to the plan of, instilling our value proposition and doing some brand positioning work.
Great. Awesome. Thank you so much, Doug, for joining us today. I know, again, you were very busy today giving interviews, and I really appreciate you taking the time to join us.
Thanks, Amin.
And we do have some questions that we received, and I'll invite Jessica to answer one of them about personal injury. Jessica, can you unmute yourself, please?
Yep, I'm here.
Awesome. Do you have the question in front of you?
I do. So the question was, what do you recommend for law firms, especially personal injury, where in most states there's stay-at-home orders, and how to market and reach out to the community when there are little to no accidents due to people staying at home or not being on the road. So there are quite a few industries out there that are pretty much on hold because of COVID-19. And with those, especially when it comes to law firms, we have a couple law firm clients in which we have similar scenarios. And what we're doing is knowing that right now our message probably won't resonate because it is a once an action happens, then they can reach out for your services type of scenario. We are planning for the future. So right now, a lot of our efforts are focused on building the customer experience on the website. So a lot of SEO, search engine optimization, to make sure that we are ranking well organically, making sure the user experience on our site is really positive and action focused. So looking at, materials like Hotjar and some of those other UX UI type of program so that we can identify how users are interacting on the site and make improvements to that experience. So really investing in the customer experience during this time, and also in our search engine results from an organic perspective, driving content on the webpage to help users understand how they can work with your business during COVID-19, but also after this. So those fundamentals are really a big priority for brands that cannot advertise at this time, and also establishing a clear strategy to start to move the needle once places open up, right? And so not every state and every county and every city will open up at the same time. So understanding kind of the roadmap of once a particular area starts to open up, where do we start implementing digital strategies? What's our messaging going to be, and how do we slow roll into that? So developing those strategies at this time is key in order to really have everything set in place. So once things start to open up, you have that ramp up that's really efficient and quick, and you can start pivoting based on results instead of scrambling to get ramped up.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jessica. And I know we are a little bit behind on time, so I just wanted to thank all of the speakers again, including yourself and Natalie, Douglas, Randy, Courtney, and Jerry for joining us today and giving us a little bit on insight, not just from a digital marketing perspective. And I know we're going to be sharing the deck where we included a lot of data about the shift that we're experiencing online. And we will be sharing that as well as the recording of today's webinar. I also want to thank some of our clients who actually attended and joined since 2 hours ago. And I wanted to thank them personally still for their continuous business and for trusting us with their business during these hard times. And lastly, we will be sharing, again, we'll be posting that on our social media, as well as we'll be sending an email to all the participants where they can see the recording of the webinar, as well as the presentation that Jessica walked us through earlier today. With that, thank you guys for your time. Please be safe, and we'll be in touch. And if you have any questions about, or you want to ask any questions to the speakers, or you have any questions about Advantix Digital, please feel free to go to our website, advantixdigital.com. Contact us. We'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you haven't had the chance to ask today, or if you have any questions about what we do and how we can help your businesses during these hard times. Thank you so much.